Here, we have some content to react to. It's called Too Much Inspiration or Not Enough Innovation. And this is going to be going into, I guess it's just kind of like a piece on Deadlock. And so I want to just kind of give my own input as we watch this, because maybe he has some good points, maybe he doesn't. I haven't watched his video yet. So let's see what he's cooking.
Oh hi, I'm just thinking of trying something new. See, I love animation as a medium, but I also love being a real person as well. So I was just thinking, what if I try combining the two? I've got some stuff right here, so I think I just gotta... Go back! You know what time it is? That's right, it's time for a new Overwatch killer. I swear, every time a new game gets released,
immediately, this game is not an Overwatch killer. This isn't trying to be Overwatch. I'm so sick of hearing that label on this game in general. Everyone, when this game is being announced, is like, another hero shooter, another Overwatch killer. Like, I am so annoyed at this. This game's a shooter MOBA. That's just what it is.
Especially if that game features heroes and or shooting, people just assume that it's an attempt on another game's life. I mean, I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer. I wake up, I log on, Twitter says there's a new Overwatch killer.
That fucking...
Like one of these games is an actual attempt at competing with Overwatch.
Alright, my mic is good.
So Deadlock.
I just
No, not that one. Valve's new 6v6 hero shooter, though it's much more accurate to describe it as Valve's new 6v6 MOBA, where you can shoot her. Deadlock is in closed alpha, and honestly, I've really been enjoying it. The best way I could describe it is a mix of Dota and a third-person shooter.
That's a fair
With
comparison.
way too many hours in both Overwatch and League, you'd think that that's nearly perfect for me. It's like the perfect combination of two games that I play way too much. But therein lies an issue that I personally have with Deadlock. But before we get into any critiques, we may as well make sure that we're all on the same page about the game's mechanics.
Okay, so before he gets into like a lot of the issues he has with the game, I'm gonna take a rough guess before he gets into it. I think his problems are gonna probably be, since he's coming from Overwatch, probably with some of the shooting, because the shooting isn't like, it isn't amazing. It's kind of more of a secondary thing. Like, most of the game plan is around the abilities and like maxing out your abilities and such. Shooting is kind of like, it's like poking. Like, it's more poking in this game than like the big damage dealer. Of course, there's like the exceptions like Wraith or Haze, but for the most part, this is mostly a game all about like shooting. Not shooting, abilities and like farming creeps and like pushing towers and stuff. So let's see where he's gonna take on this angle.
So before you even get into game, Deadlock actually has a very interesting way of going about character selection, which is the video essay way of saying that you gamble for your character. You select at least 3 characters and give them each differing levels of
I like this a lot. This is a really cool system.
Decides. Well, on the one hand, it does pretty much eliminate one-tricking, which can be seen as a bonus if you hate one-tricks, but honestly, the only thoughts I have on this is that it limits potential synergies. One of my favorite duos I discovered while playing was Mo and Krill combined with Bebop, because when Mo ults to stun someone, you can hook him or the enemy and transport both of them to you as Bebop. But with this system, you can't guarantee that both of you roll the characters you want.
I mean, I can understand that to an extent about like synergies and not being able to like push into specific synergies super hard. But I also feel like it also makes you have to think on the fly about, okay, I have the team here, this is what I'm working with, rather than, oh, this is the optimal team comp, everyone's going to be wanting to run that team comp. Because that would be super annoying if like you had a 6-stack and they were just running the most optimal team comp and like you have like a 4-stack going against them. That'd just be stupid. Because you can't have two of the same character in this game. And so it'd be super one-sided if there was like a super optimal team comp in a game and it had like some of the craziest synergy. So I don't think something like that would work in this game. But let's continue.
Moving to actual gameplay though, and it is quite literally a shooter inside a MOBA. There are 4 lanes, 2 solo, 2 duo, and you get assigned your lane at the start of each game and just roll with it. Minions come in, kill them for souls, upgrade abilities and items with those souls, and destroy the enemy base by breaking through their defense of towers and stronger towers before destroying their patron in the base. With the basics out of the way, we can go a little bit more in depth now. Not what I meant. The core controls of the game feel very nice. The movement is fluid, the guns feel good, and most of the abilities are really intuitive. Though there's some pieces about the movement that's strange to me. There's a slide to the game, but it's not really possible to use in the way you'd expect, with the map not having many slopes, so the only other time you can slide is just in neutral gameplay, but with no active sprint button, it's hard to feel like you're building speed for a slide. And that's because you aren't. So you can't actually slide on flat ground without investing something. But the reason I bring this up is because there is an actual benefit to sliding. While sliding, you have infinite ammo, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a cool resource. I really like the resource a lot.
Especially during combat, are sparse at best. There's only two ways to slide, assuming you have no slope, which is to either dash using your stamina and crouch afterwards, or to have the out-of-combat sprinting item, which gives you just enough natural speed to start slides, though it only works out of combat. I just find the sliding mechanic strange and maybe a little bit shoorhound in.
I disagree, because I feel like a lot of the map accounts for it. Like, he mentions there's little slopes in the game, which, I mean, there isn't very much elevation in terms of, like, slidable surfaces. But for what there is, like, it's what you could work with in terms of how limited the slides are. Like, if you're really good at sliding and you know how to optimize your movement and stuff, you get a lot of value out of the little slide there is. Like, especially off of the mid-boss area, you can get some crazy slides that will, especially when you're, like, running Earn, be really, really valuable to your team.
Infinite ammo portion is not listed anywhere. There's also characters who invest into their stamina typically prefer to build kinetic dash, which grants bonus ammo, doesn't consume the extra piece of stamina that a regular dash jump would, and also covers a much greater distance than sliding would. The rest of your movement options are super fun though. The dash jump, like I already mentioned, feels really nice. Regular dashing, double jumping, and climbing all fit well into how the game plays and just lets it control smoothly, which is something that I find is really important in any game that has shooter-like elements.
Absolutely.
My favorite aspect of Deadlock though has to be denying souls. Like most MOBAs, minions come.
This is such a cool mechanic in my opinion.
Earn souls, which are a high
if there's any mechanics I feel like really define Deadlock in terms of what really makes Deadlock in terms of uniqueness, it's denying soul and the way that they use movement in this game. The way that you're able to traverse in this makes it like a lot more different than any other kind of shootery MOBA. Like, I've heard comparisons from like Smite players to this game, but Smite has like a jump button for like no reason. It has like no function to the game, like in terms of mechanics, and doesn't really tie into like movement and stuff. I like the verticality, and they keep leaning into that with a lot of the recent map changes. Like, I like the amount of like, oh, I could hop on this rope, I could go up there, take an angle, or oh, I could use one of my double jumps to quickly get out of somewhere. I could, like, there's so many cool options in this, and with stuff like the wall jump and stuff, they're just adding onto it. It's one of the coolest like ways of not attacking. It's one of the coolest ways of approaching like a MOBA shooter like this, and I think it's genuinely for the game's benefit.
Of XP and money. But after killing a minion, an orb floats out of them, which you can shoot to secure additional souls, which works both ways. When the enemy kills one of your minions...
Seems like there's a zone-based advantage. Like, do you mean as in, like, oh, I'm in, like, this... Because right here, like, the haze is taking, like, an angle on the Grey Talon here. Do you mean, like, he has the advantage being right here? Because that's just kind of how MOBAs are, where you kind of want to hang around towers if you're playing defensively. Or do you mean or do you mean just like in terms of like map coverage? Like, oh, my team is like super pushed up here. All this is pretty safe to clear in terms of jungle and stuff.
You can shoot the soul that comes out to deny them those souls, which is such a fun addition to the MOBA gameplay, especially during the early game. It's by far the best way that Deadlock bridges the gap between a MOBA and a shooter, and it's honestly a really creative mechanic, even if it seems small. You need to pay attention to both minions if you want to maximize your soul gain.
I will say, I feel like the soul mechanic does kind of fall off late game. Like, of course there are applications for it where like denying is good. I mean, you want to deny when possible, but I feel like your focus switches more over to like farming in general and killing people rather than denying. Of course, again, there's exceptions. Like, I feel like denying walker is one of the big things a lot of people don't do, especially in like lower elo. I feel like what's another example? Soul Urn, like denying Soul Urn is also good if it's not being protected. There's a lot of like ways where Soul Deny does play into late game, but I do feel like it falls off in terms of how much people focus in on it, and it very much is like super important early game. Mid game, it's a little important. Then late game, it's a little less important.
Is this mechanic a little bit strange to emphasize this much?
The slide thing?
Yes.
Oh!
Is this mechanic...
Yeah, it's very much like, it's a good way to get back and engage in the fight with the slide. Like it's just a genuinely like really solid mechanic for like getting out of base and stuff. Like if you're around your tower, instead of wasting a sprint, it's usually good to just slide off that little set of stairs right there.
Also extremely impactful on the game. Also, yes, since the barrier for getting levels to unlock abilities and getting points to upgrade them is locked behind your soul count, it means that denying as many souls as you can during lane phase can give you a massive advantage of having more items, abilities, or even upgrades than your opponents do, practically automatically winning any trade you take with them. So I've hit my quota of praises, which means it's time for me to be a little bitch. More specifically, I have a fair few critiques, but they're coming from, well, not a place of love, we'll say a place of vague interest. I'm not trying to shit on the game just because I'm an Overwatch player and grrr, no one should play the game that isn't my game. I really like what I have played of Deadlock, and since it's in a closed alpha, that means there's definitely a chance for some of the pain points that I've encountered to get fixed. So with that out of the way, let's start here. I don't really vibe with this art style that much.
Really?
The character designs.
Character designs. I feel like this game's art style is really cool. Of course, it's a little messy right now because it's still being developed, and there are characters from when the game was a sci-fi era game with Neon Prime, such as Yamato or what was the other one? Bebop's current model or Grey Talon. But in general, I feel like the aesthetic that the game's going for, the early 1900s, or like occult New York thing, it's so unique and cool, and it feels so Valve because they like to do these like wacky kind of period pieces where they go back in time to something a little more cartoony. Like they'll set it in, like, take TF2 for example. It's like a 1970s game, but it has a lot of this like charm to how the characters animate and like speak and stuff. It's really cool, and I feel like I get that from Deadlock a lot.
Now, does this affect my enjoyment of the game? No, not at all. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I enjoy gameplay primarily, especially in multiplayer games like this. I'm just not the biggest fan of a 1950s mafia fantasy type of aesthetic. I prefer things a little bit more fantastical or even futuristic. This isn't to say that the character designs are bad.
See, I'm someone who likes futuristic stuff. I'm a huge Metroid guy, but I feel like for this game, it just didn't work. From what I saw of Neon Prime, the game just looked really generic, and I'm happy they moved away from that art style to something more unique. Like, this feels more like a Valve game, and that makes me happy, at least. Some people might not like it. It's all like kind of subjective because that's kind of how art is, but I'm just gonna disagree at this point here.
Not at all, mainly just that I wouldn't want them to appear in my dreams.
What does he mean by that?
But critiquing the art direction isn't really telling on how good or bad a game is, in my opinion. If you vibe with it, great, and if you don't, oh well. You can't do much about your thoughts on it. I just personally don't vibe with it that much. I'm also not the best at expressing why I may or may not enjoy a piece of art. It's generally just, this makes my brain happy. But something I do know how to talk about is gameplay, and there's only one way I can describe the majority of the characters in this game. I'm dead serious. Like, this is the best way I can describe the hero gameplay right now.
What does that mean?
So I'm not the biggest fan how out of the 21 characters, 13 of them just use a gun of some variety. Even if only a couple of them are actually hit scan, I just find it a little boring having over half...
That's also incorrect. All the weapons are hit scan outside of Bebop.
Half of your cast just wielding regular guns. We have a gargoyle, a slime guy, and this creature, and you're telling me that we're still using Thompson SMGs? Sure, some of them are projectiles, but they're such fast-moving projectiles, and every weapon is intended to be used in either mid to close range, so it doesn't really affect how you control your shots as much. I just personally like a little more variety in weapons when it comes to these kind of MOBA shooters. I want to keep Overwatch comparisons to an absolute minimum, as Overwatch is a shooter with MOBA elements,
I'm hearing
and
you
Deadlock
out.
is straight up a MOBA that you can shoot in. But Overwatch, there's 16, maybe 17 bog standard guns of some variety. Yeah, there's a twist on them in some cases, but that's over half the cast.
He's saying they look the same, but they all shoot gun and shoot. But I disagree with that, if that's the point he's making, which I want to hear him out before I make any assumptions. So let me hear that first, out what he has to say.
A really creative weapon. Lucio shoots people with sound. Sigma throws gravity balls. Venture throws exploding dirt. Some of my favorite characters to play in Deadlock so far have been Yamato, Bebop, and Haze. Haze does use SMGs, and I'm not saying that regular weapons are a bad thing, I just think a little more variety goes a long way. Yamato has some kind of shotgun projectile and grenades, while Bebop
I don't agree with this point, because I feel like everyone's guns function in very different ways, whether it be like how fast, like especially with some characters, I feel like knowing what kind of gun you're going against is very important for knowing like how much I could deny someone. Like if you're going against like an Ivy, Ivy's always going to deny first because the amount her mag has and how quickly she shoots very much like can affect your gameplay. Like yeah, it is just like everyone has gun and shoot, but the guns function in different ways, and some characters kind of hardly use their gun as much. Like Abrams has like 9 weapons in his clip, and so most of the time he's mostly focused on using his abilities and punch. But yeah, I don't completely agree with this point here. His take is more of a nitpick than anything. I guess that's fair.
A laser beam which shreds when you get some fire rate items going. I won't cover every character or else we'll be here all day. I just wish there was a little more creative liberty taken when creating the weapons that the characters use.
I mean, to be fair, they have been adding more variation to a lot of the guns too. Like they recently did add the alt fire to Viscus, where he's able to shoot like a giant ball of goo and it kind of explodes, kind of like Venture's gun in Overwatch, where it has like kind of a little small radius it shoots in. So yeah, I think they're taking some aspects of this and trying to improve on it, but generally I don't see it being that big of an issue currently.
Now, in fairness, this is much easier said than done. If a character was made fully melee or had bullets that explode after a certain distance, they would have a much harder time contesting souls from minions.
I disagree. I feel like melee characters, like a character that's purely melee based, would probably not struggle that much in terms of getting soul, because you can't contest a soul when something's getting punched. I mean, Abrams is mostly a melee character. Like most of Abrams' like big like a lot of his big builds are based around punching people and getting that lifesteal. So I don't feel like he would like I don't high key if you took away Abrams' gun and made his punch like attack like hurt more, and maybe made something so he has like a passive or something where he could break through parries or something like that, I feel like Abrams would not struggle that much.
Even the characters that are projectile based have a harder time denying souls than the hit scan characters do. Even if it takes less than half a second for their bullets to reach a soul, that's a lot longer.
This is just incorrect.
You can imagine how bad it would be if you had an extremely short range weapon. To stick on the topic of weapons though, it does bother me slightly that characters with the funky weapons like Viscus or even Ivy are focused on being more supportive. Not to say that they can't output damage, but their abilities aren't fully focused on killing, which for my DPS riddled brain is a minor letdown.
See, this is a misconception as an Ivy main that I wish was true. I really wish this was true. Ivy and Viscus are huge damage dealers. The big thing with supports in this game is they have so much self-sustain that it's kind of unhealthy. Like the fact that Ivy can have abilities where she could just rat off, like she doesn't really play with her team despite being a support character. She goes on the other side of the map, kills something, and then will fly by, maybe drop a bomb on the team fight, and then push up another lane. Like she is a crazy split pusher more than anything. I'd say she's more a split pusher than a support right now, which is kind of annoying because I do feel like her character design in terms of like what the abilities are supposed to do should be doing that. So like very much so. Like Kiri gets a free getaway by throwing the Suzu down and like teleporting. Ivy's the same way. Her version of Suzu is an invincible stun that she could drop on people, and her getaway, or what would be her teleport, is her insane ability to solo ult and fly from one side of the map to the other. It's insane. I think they need to fix that. I think that's legitimately one of the biggest, most unhealthy designs of the game right now. Get in Suzu and teleport. Exactly. Same idea with Ivy.
Because I want to play with the funky weapons. I really should emphasize that it's minor though. I mean, I was playing a full support build Ivy and was still outputting good damage and could hold my own in fights. I just prefer
Wait, let me see a support build. That isn't a support build.
like
you're running Berserker? That isn't a support build. That's, you have monster. This is a like punch Ivy. This is not a support build.
And Bebop, who are fully
so I don't know about that one.
Dealing damage. It's entirely irrational. I just wanted to mention it anyway. So before I
Oh, what does it look like? What was the build he was running?
fully spec
He was running Restorative Shot, Monster Rounds, Close Quarters, Berserker, which are, what would you do? What's it look like? What would you do? I wouldn't run support Ivy because I feel like support Ivy, like if you mostly, the big thing with supports in a MOBA like this is you can't purely put all your shit into support because people could easily counter the entire like play of support. So like if you're fighting someone and they're like, oh, this person's just spamming heals on their teammates, I'm gonna get heal bane, which gets rid of like 50% of your heal in terms of like, or it's some crazy percentage, which it's like the DPS passive. You could just basically apply like the Overwatch DPS passive to anyone.
Dealing damage. It's entirely irrational. I just wanted.
That's kind of what makes this game sick to me, in my opinion. Though you're able to be like, oh, I see an issue there. I'm gonna build around that issue and try to address it. So it'll be like, oh, I'm fighting someone who's using poison or slowdown like Kelvin. Like if I'm fighting like a Kelvin, for example, I'm gonna try to prioritize getting debuff remover or debuff reducer so that I'm taking less slowdown and I'm able to go in and kill the Kelvin.
Mention it anyway. So before I talk about the characters even more, because I've not even gotten into their abilities yet, please allow me to just vent some frustrations real quick. Why can anyone just leave the game? I know it's just a testing period, but like, why can anyone just leave in the middle of the match with no penalty? I don't get it.
Because it's annoying. It's really annoying. We just had like most of the stream I've been dealing with leavers, and it's really frustrating when you're like 30 minutes into a game and someone just leaves because they die. Like, I get that it's like, oh, just a testing period right now, but they want to get as much information right now in terms of like matches and stuff, and people just being able to leave for free would be awful. I think nobody would be able to finish a game if they had like a bad start, which is pretty common in MOBAs. So maybe they'll fix that later for like a casual mode and everything, but right now I don't think we need like no leavers penalty.
There's a massive notification that will pop up in the top left of your screen that just says, this match is now safe to leave without penalty. Like, no! Penalize anyone who leaves! Penalize everyone who leaves the game! What do you mean? I truly do not get the logic behind this. Like, okay, one person leaves the game, alright, so your game quality is gonna dip. So you know what the game says? It just says, oh yeah, alright, the game quality's gone down. Someone left. Maybe they were tilted. Maybe they were just being a baby. Maybe their internet just went out. Well, it doesn't matter. All of you can leave now.
To be fair, it does take like, I think it's like a couple minutes before it'll make that pop-up come up. And it's completely on the players if they want to leave or not. If the game's going like so poorly, where it's like, well, this is a lost cause of a game anyway, I think that's perfectly fine. I think they handled that okay. I think it's perfectly okay for right now.
Like, I don't see the purpose of it. You're making the game quality worse. Like, why? Like, is this something from Dota? I've never played Dota, so I wouldn't know. But like, if this is from Dota, then I can say with confidence this is kind of stupid. Like. And speaking of stuff from Dota, you can pause the match. Now look, in fairness, I know that this is a good feature in concept. It's handy, and typically it's only going to be used by people who just want to, you know,
I think this,
has to
whatever he's about to mention, I'm pretty sure he.
I don't know, like,
because I already know where he's gonna pause it. Here, let me get the clip. Let me get the clip. Literally this clip.
Press P to unpause.
Wait, can I just keep you guys paused?
Yes, for 20 seconds.
Guys, nee, this is actually good because we need a pause. Everyone get some water, get some fresh air. You take your pause too, my friend. We tilt the enemy team. Take your pause, trust me.
This is why they changed the way pause works. So it's three. It's limited to 3 per team, which I think they addressed it pretty well. So this is probably just outdated kind of video.
That's great. Consider there are like Valorant players playing this game right now. I had a game where someone died and I just paused the game because they were being a whiny baby. Like, it's too much power to be giving these players. So after that brief intermission, we can return to talking about the characters because their abilities are incredibly fun, but also a little bit linear at times.
What do you mean?
Yamato as an example. Her 2 is a targeted dash to an enemy. Her 3 is a slash in front of her. But her 1, a charge up damaging ability with some decent range. The most optimal combo is to charge up 1 for as long as you can to do damage before going in with 2, and using 3 for some damage and a heal. As for 4, it's your ult. It can be thrown in when needed, but realistically, you'd use it after 3 since it resets your cooldowns. Like I said, I love Yamato, but there's effectively only one way to use her abilities. You'd nearly never want to use the charge up in close range unless you just have no other option.
I disagree, because the whole point of a MOBA like this is you're able to add the flexibility through items. You're able to be like, oh, I need to get in quickly, but I can't use my 2? Warp Stone or Phantom Strike. Like, this is kind of a weird criticism in my opinion, because a lot of the flexibility that you want in terms of these abilities comes through items and how you use active items. Active items are such an underused part for a lot of people, and I need more people to start using them more, because they're going to bring so much value and a lot more interesting stuff to your gameplay. Like, oh, I'm mowing krill. I'm underground. People keep going on top of buildings when they try to run from me while I'm underground. What do I do here? Phantom Strike. Teleport right behind them. Come out of the burrow, do a bunch of damage. Or Warp Stone. Teleport up there, do big damage with the little spin move. At least that's how I look at it.
Available to you. This isn't true in every case. To return to another one of my favorites for a moment, look at Bebop. Yes, his most optimal combo is 3-2-1. Hook an enemy into you, stick your bomb on them, and then punt them back into their team. But he has other options when it comes to using that bomb on too. You can stick it on a minion and put it towards the enemies as a way to make it blow up. Or even throw it on an ally who can dash in quickly, like Yamato, allowing you to save your hook to guarantee your punch so that you can power up your primary fire. I need to say that some character kits though, like Vindicta, flow perfectly. There's synergy within their tools, such as how Vindicta can use her 2.
I feel like a lot of this is just like a lack of knowledge in terms of what you could do with active items and such, because like even him mentioning like, oh, you could kind of move around like what you could do with your abilities as Bebop. A lot of Bebop's like higher level play is around active items. Like more people do less of the 3-2-1 and do like 3 pop the bomb on them, warps and chase after them, pop another bomb, maybe echo shard onto them, like, and then do another bomb, like some shit like that. Like you could do a lot of cool combos with active items, and I feel like he's not really taking that for account here, but yeah.
An escape, a movement tool, a rapid fire DPS option, or even just as a way to get a better angle for her snipes on the ult. Haze has some invisibility and sleep dart to help her take off angles and flanks with her single target focused damage from her guns. And Wraith is the classic frontline DPS who wants to melt down the enemy frontlines before teleporting to and hounding on the backline. But then there's also characters where stuff just doesn't add up. Take Infernus. His ult and 2 do synergize with each other. The ult starts a timer before he blows up and stuns an area around him, with his 2 allowing him to speed up and rush in so that he can get as many enemies as possible. But his passive and recommended build doesn't follow this engage style. It encourages him to hang back, spreading several damage over time effects on the enemies with his passive and ricochet item. Sometimes the designs just
I feel like
themselves.
I don't really feel like this is a game issue. I feel like he's more putting his own linearity with his gameplay onto the game as a whole and just assuming that's how the game is. I feel like because he's just being like, oh, this is what the recommended build does and stuff. I think you need to experiment more with active items, because I feel like active items will very much allow you to try new things with your characters. Because he's like, oh, you could synergize your 2 and 3, but sure, I mean, like, sure, that's good, but sometimes your 3 could be used in a different way, or maybe you could use your ult in a different way. Like, I don't completely agree with him here. I don't feel like it's completely linear in terms of what you're supposed to do with your movesets. It's completely built around how you do your builds.
Same as some guy who makes videos in his room about games that he loves with overly dramatic and negative sounding titles, which actually makes it seem like he doesn't like the games that he's talking about whatsoever. Wait, and that's a really strange thing about the designs of certain characters. While I find the vast majority of them really fun, some of them just don't seem to know what they want to do. Take Lady Geist. 2 of her abilities have tremendous range and seemingly gear her towards being more...
Yeah, I hate to say this, but it seems like he's allocating jump in and then jump out. Yeah, it feels like he's trying to play this game kind of like Overwatch, which isn't quite what you're supposed to do in like team fights and stuff. You use the different like builds and synergy. Like the synergies come from how you build your character and how you use those items to synergize with your team. Like if I'm playing Ivy, for example, I'm like, okay, what did I get teamed up with here? Oh, I have an Infernus. I have a Vindicta. Awesome. I'm probably not going to be able to get some big like combo with my ult currently. Maybe I'll be able to drop in like the Geist or something for like getting that super off or something, or maybe I could drop in Kelvin to get like a bubble on like mid boss or something. Like how Hammond is before the shield change. Yeah, like it's all about like how you engage with it. It's all very different depending on what characters you're fighting against, what kind of like team you have in terms of composition, which is why I like the randomized team composition, because it forces you to adapt and try out different builds, which is really, really cool in my opinion. Like here's a good example. Let's say I'm Ivy, because I have the most knowledge on Ivy here in terms of the characters. I'm like, okay, what am I fighting against? A Yamato, a Shiv, a Bebop, what's his name? I'm trying to think. Mo and Krill, a Hayes, and an Abrams. I'm like, all right, this is probably going to be a fight where a lot of these bigger guys are going to try to go into like huge team fights a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build around getting like free picks on like objectives here and such. Or, because I mean, there are support Ivy builds, right? I mentioned how it isn't optimal to go for support Ivy, but sometimes it is optimal. Sometimes you do want to go for a rescue beam instead of, not Tesla bullets, but like maybe some other more like aggressive pick. It's all depending on how the match is going, and I love how much like adaptability there is in games. It's kind of like a fighting game where you're like, I'm getting zoned out by this dude, how do I adapt to this? Oh, I could jump over the fireball more, I need to parry more, I need to do this and this. Like it's the many adaptations that makes it so fun to me. This game isn't as linear as like a game like Overwatch where I'm like, okay, this is what my comp does, I need to jump in, I'm a dive character, so I gotta go play dive. Like I like the micro adjustments you have to make in game. It's a lot more focused in on those kinds of engagements than the overall like team fight. Oh, this is what I could do because this is what everyone's running in terms of big players.
Focused on
I hope that makes sense.
poking the enemy and whittling them down. But her 2 and ult are melee range and all about draining HP. But her gun matches her perfectly. It's a small handgun that can be easily concealed within a bag, and she's this rich, fancy My family watches these videos. I probably shouldn't make that joke. Her weapon fits. My point is that I fully support her weapon just being a gun. It fits in this case. It makes sense, you know? Anyway, a large part of this comes down to builds and information.
Yeah.
Which I have to say, this game does a really great and really bad job at giving the player information. Earlier on, I mentioned how sliding grants infinite ammo. You do not get told this in the tutorial section, which covers sliding. There's additional pieces like this as well. Like the unsecured souls item was something I never understood until it was explained to me. They're temporary souls you lose with death.
Is the sliding thing not explained in the tutorial? I'm pretty sure the tutorial does explain the sliding thing. I might be wrong though.
Go by once you pick them up. And honestly, I don't even know what the mid-boss actually does yet. I'm just assuming
What?
it's some kind of combat buff. But the big thing is builds, which is where I have to praise and question Valve at the same time.
Sounds like this isn't a game where you have to be dead set on a single playstyle. You have to blend the way you play to help your team. Absolutely, yes. That's how you like carry around like what I did last time. Because I made early in the game, me and Tony were fighting those two people, right? And we were getting absolutely destroyed because we did not have the right composition for dealing with an Abrams, and I forgot what the other character was that we were fighting immediately. We were like, okay, we're taking way too much damage against these dudes. I was like, you stay here, you protect the Guardian. I'm going to go help some other team members since I'm kind of built in terms of my characters to go into other lane. I'm going to take the fight as like my characters since they're kind of built to roam and go push up other lanes so that I can give value to those 3 other teams since I, as a character, am supposed to do stuff like that. And from that, I was able to kind of carry that last game.
In the shop, there's a browse builds button, which lets you look at the most popular community-made builds, which are infinitely better than the default ones you get recommended.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you don't get told about the browse builds function, which is weird because that's such a useful tool, especially
Wait,
at the same
wait,
time.
is he complaining
In the
about
shop,
browse builds not being easy to find?
there's a browse build.
It's right there. It's right. I don't really get this criticism. It's literally inside the build screen. You could see the button right here, right next to search. It says browse builds. And this is where you can go and explore other people's
Which lets you look at
builds.
the most popular community-made builds. Which
This
are
is a kind of
infinitely better
dumb
than the default
criticism.
ones you get recommended. But the thing is, you don't get told about the browse builds function, which is weird because that's such a useful tool, especially when you're new to the game. One of the biggest pain points of MOBAs is how hard they are to get into. You need to learn a new character, learn how they should be played, learn the general mechanics of the
Yeah, it's
game,
his nitpick
learn what it's
again,
like to
yeah.
play against the other characters, and of course, learn how to strengthen your character efficiently. Having builds made by the community, the top players if you will, makes things so much easier when trying to learn. You can think of it like training wheels. Once a player understands the game and its mechanics better, they can start experimenting with their own builds, but until then, they can use these guaranteed safe ones. So my main question is, why isn't the browse builds button something you get told about? I only found it after like 6 or
Again, I feel like, wait,
7 hours of playing, and it
6 or 7 hours? Were you just not using the build screen? Like, there's no auto build feature. It was like right in front of your face the entire time. I don't know what the game like needed to tell you there to be like, there's a browse builds button right there, right on the build screen. Use it.
immensely improved my experience when trying new characters. It even tells you which abilities to level up and when. I just stumbled onto it randomly because I was like, hey, what's this browse build button do? Clicked on it and then it's like, oh, this is incredibly useful. Why don't I get told?
Yeah, this is a dumb nitpick in my opinion.
And this is the big thing about Deadlock to me. There's no hook. There's nothing massively unique within the game that stands out to me as the reason to play it beyond its characters and its concept. Obviously, you can't play this game's characters anywhere else. This is the only game that I can play Yamato in after all. But like I said earlier, over half of the game's characters just use generic guns as their primary weapons, which just takes away from the cast to me.
I disagree. I really disagree with the game not really having a hook. I mean, like, a character like Lash, there is no character that will ever work in another game unless it tries to copy this game's style like Lash. Like, Lash is a character that's completely reliant on... The game has huge verticality, so he can fly, basically, with the amount of, like, grapple hooks and stuff. His entire thing is about verticality. Like, no game has really had verticality like this. I think that's, like, the big hook of this. He would really hate Paladins? It sounds like it, because Paladins does also have, like, that build and, like, micromanagement. I'm actually surprised Paladins never, like, really tried a character like Lash, where you're able to, like, stay in the sky so much and, like, are so movement-based. Like, there's been no game that has this much movement that's tried, like, this MOBA shooter style before. Closest we've gotten is Paladins, and I don't feel like Paladins took advantage of that fully.
All controlled really well and are fun. I need that to be clear, but it's just that there's not a lot of new ideas at play here in the character design.
I disagree.
So within the core
Again, Jacob Lash is an asshole, and Jacob Lash is maybe one of the most unique character designs Valve has ever made on a gameplay level. It is one of the coolest characters, and I would love to see a character try to do something like Lash again, like having a character where you have so much, like, reliability on building your air up and then grabbing the entire team, chucking him down, and, like, slaying him. Like, I love this character's design. There's so much cool shit in this game, and what makes it really pop is the amount of builds, like the amount of ways you can approach a character design. No character plays like these characters because these characters are always adapting to the situations these specific characters are putting against each other. I don't know. I disagree with this. I feel like this is a really unique game, and I feel like that's why it's, like, in the top 10 for Steam right now, easily.
gameplay. I mean, the gameplay itself is pretty much just Smite, but with some Call of Duty, Fortnite, Overwatch flavoring. To me, it doesn't excel as a MOBA. In League, I loved playing jungle because I loved all of the strategy behind it. I loved planning out my routes. I loved planning when to take a gank on the enemy team. I loved punishing the enemy jungler for making a bad play or a bad gank by stealing their camps. The only similarity to that in Deadlock is just choosing the right time to roam in the early game. There's not really much.
Well, yeah,
else.
there's no dedicated jungler character, and I think that's really cool. I think every character to an extent is a jungler, because there are points where you're like, okay, I need to go jungle. I need to, like, really focus on that. Oh, I'm in the middle of jungling, but I could see I could get a pick or something like that. Everyone could do that in this game. It's the flexibility and creativity that makes this game really pop. And I feel like this video in general is just trying to box into the game a little too much. At least that's my critique towards this creator right now.
It doesn't excel in its shooter elements because the majority of the fights happen in extremely close range. There's only a few characters that can take you on at mid-range, and even then, that's either only with abilities or with some heavy item investment. At long range, not happening at all. While Deadlock uses its inspiration of shooters and MOBAs extremely well, especially when combining them into one kind of game, at the same time it falls flat because it doesn't innovate enough on either idea.
I feel like the problem that I've at least seen from the points being made here is there isn't enough exploration with the tools that the game is giving you that is making this creator at least feel like he's really boxed into like a specific play style, and he doesn't really click with that play style, which I could get that. I can understand that, but I would highly recommend people, if they're like, okay, I feel like I'm playing really flat right now, like I'm playing the same kind of thing every match, go into the sandbox mode and experiment with new items. I do that constantly. I've spent like probably like 30-40 hours out of my like playtime probably just messing around sandbox mode and trying out new things and labbing out new ideas. That's how you get to the top of this game, and that's how you like get the most value out of like engaging with your items and tool set. That's how you get so much creativity and flexibility, and that's why I think this game is like one of the best games on the market right now.
It is pretty much just a MOBA that controls like a shooter, and I don't know if that's enough. I mean, certain characters and items allow you to reach high grounds that most typically would never be able to reach at all, but they've got these like lightning, zappy rods on top of them that do massive damage to you for the longer you stay up there, just discouraging anyone from using their movement options correctly to try and take advantage of the uniqueness of.
Why not try to, because I feel like a lot of these rods and stuff are purely there just to it's making the most out of a little, so it makes you because I mean, like, Overwatch even has this issue. Why can't I, as Doomfist, a character that's super movement based, like, be able to go up certain areas and get blocked off by invisible walls and stuff? It's just because the game wants to limit you in ways so that you have to be more creative with your abilities. You could use that high ground idea, but maybe somewhere else where maybe you could get even more value out of
Their kit. I know that sounds minor, but that really weakens the shooter element of it to me. It's as if there's a tug of war between the MOBA and shooter sides of Deadlock. When something leans too far in one direction, like using your character's kit to play on the high ground most couldn't reach being something expected from a shooter, it yanks the rope to make sure it doesn't outweigh the MOBA aspects by implementing something to discourage it. And this happens in reverse as well. Last hitting minions is common practice in a MOBA, but since that's something you wouldn't expect in a shooter, minions hang around for a second after dying to let you secure them, not punishing people who
We'll look
don't
at the
manage
comments
their ammo
after.
correctly. It's stuck in this awkward middle ground of not trying to succeed at either. As it stands, I don't know if I'll be playing Deadlock in the future as much as I have played either of its inspirations. But what I can say is that I really, really hope that I am wrong. Despite all my critiques, and quite frankly the shit that I've been talking, I have been enjoying the game, I have been having fun with it, especially with my friends. But there's something missing, something that adds that spark, something that makes me want to come back and play the game again and again. Because without that, I don't know if the game is going to last up to all the hype it's currently receiving. But I can only hope that I am just completely wrong and that we get something wholly unique added to Deadlock in the future. But either way,
I don't think you have to add anything. I think it's there already. I think he just hasn't explored, like, I mean, I think the most telling thing here is he got frustrated at a function that you would see if you were experimenting with builds a lot more. At least that is something I'm seeing with this video so far.
Method of getting into the alpha. It is a great time, and if some of the pain points that I mentioned get addressed, I can honestly see Deadlock joining my long-term game rotation. So if we learned anything today, is that crossbreeding shouldn't always be encouraged, lads.
Okay. This game needs a battle pass and the game is crazy good. I mean, I would like monetization of this game to like be healthy. I know Valve games in general kind of have like, they struggle a lot with the marketplace. Like, I mean, CS is infamous for their $500,000 blue like sniper skins and shit. Oh god.
Ah, for feck's sake.
Is a joke, no worries. No, I get you.
Don't really have much to say here, so I'll
Is he
link
just
the
closing
description
this
to my
out?
Twitch, Twitter, and Discord, so check
Yeah, go
them out if you
support
like.
this
And
dude,
for now,
because
enjoy some
I don't want to be
Bluetooth
just a
and
leech
video
off this dude's content.
So I've hit my quota of praises for this video, which means... Fuck.
Oh, is this just gonna be?
So I've hit my quota of praises, which means...
Okay, it's just gonna be blueberries. I kind of want to see what the comment section is like. At the top, because my below messages still stand, I want to add an extra piece. A lot of people, like honestly, solid 40% of the comments are making excellent points against mine. Mostly, okay. Put bluntly, a lot of stuff in this video is wrong, be it from outdated my experience with the game, writing the script, or something entirely. Okay. Do you know what? Good on him. Good on him for like addressing, being like, okay, that was a me issue with a lot of this. Sliding such as being. Oh, this is from 2 weeks. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Honestly, yeah. This is a solid video. Even though I feel like he didn't quite like address everything like perfectly, I do feel like a lot of his points were interesting, and it did make me think a little more. Even though I don't. Oops. I feel like a lot of his points were pretty interesting. Yeah, he took it on the chin, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he has. I mean, I've been subbed to him for a bit. He has some solid videos on like Overwatch, but I thought this would be a really interesting video. And you know, it was an interesting video. There was some interesting like thought. Like I think probably his best like. I think his best criticism is most likely the one about guns and how we need a little more variety, which they are addressing with alt-fire and stuff. So I hope we get more of that kind of stuff in the future. But let's see.